You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. Great to have you with me for yet another week. And this is going to be a good one where I gave y'all hints at the end of last week's episode on my guest this week. Several of you correctly predicted who it would be. You knew just from those few hints that I gave you. He's one of my favorite content creators, broadcaster, podcaster, YouTube guy, author. He makes me laugh and think all at the same time. Yes, Jay Dyer is with us here this week on Counterflow. And the last month or so, I suppose, I've done some shows where we kind of focused on the massive amount of propaganda that we're being hit with. I would say on a daily basis, but maybe hour by hour, minute by minute at this point. Today, Jay is here to help us not only understand what the propaganda is, but more so, who's behind it? How are they doing it? They control pop culture. That's on purpose. They pull a lot of strings in Hollywood, the media, and even the church. They've got their tentacles everywhere. Who is it? Who is they? Quote unquote, they. We're going to get into all of that. And then how do we stop it? How do we beat they? How do we beat these people? Politics? Is that the way to stop this evil? Is it through politics and voting? Some of you think yes, some of you think no. We're going to talk about that. Is it just bad actors in high up, powerful places, or does it even go deeper than that? We're going to talk about all of that kind of stuff. If you don't have Jay's two books, I highly recommend them. Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2. I've got part 2 right here in my hand. Esoteric Hollywood Part 2, more sex, cults, and symbols in film. We get into some of that kind of stuff today. Like I said, he is one of my very favorite content providers. He's hilarious. You will get a touch of that here in this episode. He's known for his deep analysis of Hollywood, geopolitics, and culture. He is the head guy over at jaysanalysis.com. And now, finally, he's on Counterflow. Jay Dyer, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on. How are you?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks, Buck. Glad to be here. And I did actually watch, I think, 3 episodes of your podcast when you invited me on. So,
okay.
You get approval. I made the mistake in the past of agreeing to come on people's podcasts, and then I don't know what they talk about, and then I end up on some idiot's podcast. So that I regretted being on. But yours is not in that category, so I'm glad to be here.
Very cool. Yes, I've done that same thing, and you find yourself a few minutes in going, "Uh-oh, what did I do here?"
Yeah, right.
I guess we'll start with an introduction of yourself. I'll let you do it because it's really maybe relative to most of my guests, I could name like 20 different things it seems like you do. So I'll let you kind of have the floor here and introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, I guess the internet kind of has evolved into this thing where it makes it possible to, kind of make yourself the product, and you kind of put yourself out there, and pretty much anything that you're interested in, you can kind of turn into like, your commodity or your persona or whatever you want to say. So, yeah, I mean, I started doing a lot of film analysis, and that was my original blog. And then that evolved into a book. And then we did one season of a TV show on the basis of that. And then I kind of accidentally really fell into doing debates. It wasn't something I set out to do. I'd always done public debates. And then those kind of got a little bit of attraction. And so we did several public debates with atheists and Muslims and stuff like that. So that kind of was a separate thing that I ended up doing. And then I've always done kind of geopolitical analysis on the side as well. And then that kind of got integrated into what I do. And then I've always had a ridiculous, silly side where I don't, take myself too seriously. I do a lot of really weird, bizarre, absurdist kind of humor and satire. So I just started integrating all of that into, what I do. And so I just put all of it's just a reflection of my interests and what I'm into out there. So I cover geopolitics, philosophy, film, theology, debates, etc. And then, of course, now hosting also the 4th hour of the Lord Voldemort show.
Yes, and for those listening that say the Lord Voldemort show, what is that? I know there's a way to get yourself in trouble. I'm talking myself in saying certain names. The algorithm kicks you off. Let's just say many of you know I was from Austin, Texas for 20-something years. It's a show that I've talked about many times out of Austin, Texas. I think that's good enough. You guys get the hint.
Al Jonas, the Al Jonas show.
There you go. Exactly. Like I said, I could, you do a lot of things. I could sit and talk with you about a ton of stuff because you have many, topics on your episodes. And I think, dang, I've never thought to ask him about this before. But I've been covering propaganda recently generally, I guess broadly I have, but more recently, specifically with Russia and Ukraine, and it's cranking out more so now, I think, even than it did over COVID. But what I have not touched upon is the CIA and what they might have to do with some propaganda being pushed upon all of us. And a lot of times they have some control over the tenor and the direction that culture is taking, that propaganda is taking. You have written a book and you talk about the CIA and Hollywood, the Pentagon and Hollywood, culture, etc. Let me ask you this broadly, and then we can get into the weeds. How much of a role has the CIA played in driving, certain areas of culture over the years to you?
A huge role. So if you think about the origins of the men who were kind of the origin of the OSS, they came out of wartime ad agencies. They came out of wartime propaganda themselves. So this would be Paley, Sarnoff, some of whom were also Skull and Bones people. And the OSS was set up, as we know, as a sort of nascent version, what would become the CIA, kind of a privatized intelligence service. Some people say basically the Rockefeller's private army, you could say. And so their whole ethos was propaganda. And so, they're in the circles of people like Edward Bernays, who, was sort of the father of modern propaganda. The grandfather of modern propaganda, you could say, is H.G. Wells. And the Royal Society kind of had the Royal Society model of international affairs and roundtable groups. That was actually the model for the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, Pratt House. All of these things formed the nascent model for what the Western, the Anglo-American establishment would be run by. So the CIA ultimately had a huge amount to do with and to say in terms of culture creation and propaganda. I mean, you can almost argue that really one of the main functions of these so-called intelligence agencies is the crafting of pop culture, amazingly. When I started studying this topic, I certainly didn't think that. I never would have thought that. It seems kind of outlandish. And but the more that I dove into Hollywood history, the more I dove into propaganda in terms of my more academic side when I was doing grad work, I was just over and over and over amazed at the level of interconnectedness and planning and strategy that goes into culture creation. I think most of us think culture just kind of springs up organically. It's just kind of out there. And, one musician is popular because he's really good and he got the right deal. And another actress or actor, comes to the top because they're just so good. And it's not really like that. I don't want to oversimplify it as if talent doesn't play a role. Certainly it does. But when you look into the Cold War, you really start drilling into how important pop culture was for what's called Weltanschauungskrieg, which is worldview warfare. And you can see how worldview warfare then would relate very closely to apologetics, because when you're doing debates and apologetics, you're doing worldview warfare. And so, ironically, there's a pretty intimate connection between philosophy, worldviews, psychological warfare, debate, and worldview or belief formation. And what that is how we come to form our beliefs about ourselves and the world. And of course, you might think, well, we all know that's what we do in school, right? School teaches us. Well, actually, that's part of how we form our beliefs. Belief formation involves a whole host of things. And one of the things that's really lost is the importance of virtue and vice when it comes to epistemology. That's a separate topic. I know we're not here to talk about that. But you could think of something like the Frances Stoner Saunders has a book called The CIA and the Cold War. In that book, she's an academic. And that book is about the creation of what's called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And that was in the 60s and 70s when the CIA in the Cold War basically recruited all of these pop artists, weird artists, and even classical musicians, basically just a front to cut out for funding all of these acts during the Cold War to spread the Western idea. Now, that doesn't make communism or Sovietism the good guy. So we're not really in the domain of good guy, bad guy. We're just in the domain of hard power politics, basically. And that's how I think it's the key to understanding this and seeing this, is to set aside, for the sake of the argument in the moment, good guy, bad guy, and think about it just in terms of the facts and in terms of power politics. And then we can understand why, for example, the CIA would recruit Gloria Steinem, give her money to promote Miss Magazine and feminism. They would put money into Playboy magazine. They would put money into pop art, Andy Warhol, Jackson Pollock. They would recruit French deconstructionists, philosophers, postmodernists. All of this really was part of abstract art, weird rock and roll. I mean, ultimately, I kind of think the whole 60s countercultural revolution itself was a CIA kind of promoted intelligence, military intelligence promoted thing. That doesn't mean everybody was an asset or an agent. It just means that this counterculture ideology was actually 100% a establishment promoted ideology. And that's because a lot of the people who do the social engineering, they have a long-term goal. And I was surprised, for example, to read one of the most prominent CIA operatives in the 20th century. In his retrospective Game of Nations, Miles Copeland, from the Copeland family, Stuart Copeland, right, the police, same family, he wrote this retrospective talking about all of his operations in Syria, because he was kind of the corporate consultant to Syria during the Cold War. And so I'm reading about all these, black operations and all this stuff and his account. And then the book, it kind of blew me away, because I'd read a lot of elite texts when I read that book about 5 years ago. But just to see him in the book in such a candid way, where he says, oh, by the way, the whole purpose of why we modernized Syria and then Egypt, was so that their population would come down, so that in the long term, they could be integrated into a global government where we will have mass depopulation. That's how he ends the book. It kind of blew me. And he says, if you want to understand the modus operandi of the West in the Cold War, he says, go read The Council on Foreign Relations and Bertrand Russell. So the CIA operative running all these operations in Syria and then in Egypt in the Cold War says, oh, yeah, by the way, this is all for basically killing everybody. And he says, one way we did this in Egypt was to import Hollywood to Egypt. So Hollywood is a weapon that is exported. Joseph Nye, for example, he wrote a famous essay where he calls it soft power. Right? So Hollywood and culture are forms of soft power that you export to do ideological warfare. So, and that's just Hollywood. That's just pop culture. The music industry, right? There's a whole other arm of this, right? So the long, I ramble, but the long answer is the CIA has a huge role in culture creation. I mean, all of those psychonauts out of the 60s, Leary and these people, I mean, they were openly working for the CIA. Tim Leary says, if you want to thank anybody for the 60s counterculture, he says, thank me and the CIA.
Yeah, within that rant, you touched upon like 10 things I have charted down to ask you about. But it's interesting because the 60s thing is one of the things I wanted to ask you about, the hippie and counterculture and all of this stuff, the Bay Area. And we'll get to Father Seraphim Rose and how he experienced some of that too in this interview. But a lot of people look at that, even people like that are kind of quote unquote based or red-pilled on a lot of things, look at that and think, well, that was the ultimate freedom movement. Like they were really rebelling against this Puritan American evangelical attitude of the 40s, 50s, and so on. And that, boy, once the 60s hit, that was like the actual real rebellion and real freedom. And it's funny when you look into this and when I listen and read your stuff, it's so controlled. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's really that's the normie boomer narrative. And I'm not trying to be mean or unfair to the boomers, but most of them will explain it that way, right? And it's not like that's completely false, but it's really just part of the picture. And there's extensive documentation in the writings of the elite that proves my point, right? My analysis of it. Again, so does that mean that every 60s folk boomer rocker was part of some vast CIA program? Absolutely not. But what it means is that people were allowed, for example, to promote CIA or LSD largely at the behest of the CIA. So people like Stanley Owsley, for example, or excuse me, Owsley Stanley, I was getting his name mixed up. He was the guy who basically, at the behest of the CIA, made thousands or maybe even millions of doses of LSD, right? And so he was allowed to pass them out. You had these different concerts and venues, Altamont, you had Haight-Ashbury, you had the Laurel Canyon scene where this stuff was allowed to be given out. Now, granted, okay, yeah, it's true that LSD wasn't at that time illegal, but I mean, it was obvious from the years of research that had already been done to produce LSD that this was a very serious drug. I mean, this can have some really serious consequences. They knew this. And so they really basically did a large social experiment. And I see, Ken Kesey and all of these people kind of participating in that sort of experiment to see what would happen to society. And then as it turns out, eventually we get proof and evidence of this from people like Tim Leary or the Esalen Institute, who talked about being kind of the brainchild of this new thought, this new movement, this 60s counterculture, which is based in a kind of Aquarian New Age philosophy, which itself is based in occult philosophy. And there's a long history of occult philosophy being connected to intelligence agencies and to, social engineering, manipulation, and mind control. So it's only natural that you would get something like the Esalen Institute, which curiously has all of these connections to people in the military intelligence, people who are global thought leaders. I mean, even still, the Esalen Institute, hosts a lot of these people to come and speak. And again, it's not like it's a secret thing, right? This is being done in the open, right? I mean, they were openly doing these things to be what you might call change agents, right? This kind of stuff. That's a term that's used. And so I think that there might have been some people in the 60s in the establishment, the power structure, who were more conservative minded, sure, and they didn't necessarily want this. But plenty of people who just had this really pragmatic, materialistic, Darwinistic, ends justify the means bent in their worldview. People like the behaviorists, people like the Rockefeller Foundation, who have a radical materialist view of life. I mean, they would see no ethical or moral qualms with doing these kinds of things on a large scale. And if you read a white paper like Changing Images of Man, put out by Stanford Research Institute, I mean, it basically says this, right? We need to just alter everybody's view of themselves and others and the world via these large-scale social engineering revolutions. And eventually, by the 1970s, Stanford was putting out white papers that said, let's promote anarchism, let's promote revolution, let's promote veganism. They were even saying in the late 70s, vegetarianism and veganism would be a key way to go after the population's diet so that they would be less fit to oppose the designs of the mass depop agenda. And you are now seeing that roll out by the elites, by the billionaires, by the gazillionaires, literally saying, Bill Gates, we don't need to eat meat no more. Everybody needs to stop eating meat. Just eat my fake shit burgers, right? Literally, he's making shit burgers, right? They want to take feces. They want to take stuff grown in a test tube, right? And make us eat that. That was something that the same crop of the elite said 100 years ago. H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, they literally said, your food for the masses that's all just going to come out of labs will ban you having cows and eating meat. Here it is. It's rolled out. It's been in the works for at least over 100 years.
I love when these really cool companies offer to sponsor my show, and that's exactly what has happened with the Gold River Trading Company. It's only the best tea I've ever had in my life. The names alone will probably sell you guys on them. They've got the whole leaf 1776 American breakfast black tea. Then is my favorite, the gunpowder green tea, peach and apricot flavored, if you will. They've got peppermint green tea. Check this out. If you're stressed out in the evening and trying to mellow out, maybe even one of my episodes has raised your stress level, Gold River Trading Company has the chamomile herbal tea that's spearmint and lavender flavor, so you can kind of mellow out in the evenings. Give it a shot. Personally, I'm trying to quit drinking energy drinks in the afternoon, and now I've switched over to the gunpowder green tea for the pick-me-up. I can actually pronounce what's in this. It's tea instead of all those crazy ingredients in my energy drinks. So, since they are sponsoring this show, I've got you a promo code. It's BUCK, B-U-C-K, at checkout. That will get you 10% off of your order. If you don't love tea, they've also got cocoa, so check that out as well. That's at goldriverco.com. It's for Gold River Trading Company, goldriverco.com. Promo code BUCK, B-U-C-K, will get you 10% off of your order. Reward these guys for reaching out and sponsoring shows like mine. Thank you guys. Let's get back to the show. You write about something known as full spectrum dominance. It's a plan, almost like an info war, it seems like, from the Pentagon's angle. Can you talk about what that entails?
Yeah, going from memory, there was a document that the Pentagon put out under Rumsfeld around 2000, 2001, to someone there, and it was called full spectrum dominance, or used that term. And it was about, in the military, you have the idea of land, sea, and air, right? Being dominating the land, sea, and the air in terms of warfare. And this is a new approach to everything. So with the rise of technology, with the acceptance of technocracy by our elites going back at least 100 years, the idea would be that now with the advance of technology, the capabilities are there to actually literally dominate not just land, sea, and air in a military sense, but every area of life, including the mind and including the biosphere. So it's that radical of a plan. Now, I don't recall if the original document of Rumsfeld, it is kind of a spell, right? Put a rum spell on me. I don't remember if the actual first document from Rumsfeld actually was talking about like transhumanist stuff, but I think it's implied in there because they were talking about even the PNAC document, which he was involved in. It had new forms of warfare, bio-warfare, race-specific weapons, nano warfare. This kind of stuff comes up in PNAC. So I think it's assumed in that. But full spectrum dominance is basically just the idea that of total control of man, the biosphere, and the mind itself. There was another Army War College document written called "The Mind Has No Firewall." I think it was written in the late 90s. Expresses the same idea, right? Like that ultimately, once we can gain control of man's mind through things like nanotech, like Ray Kurzweil talks about, then sky's the limit for total control.
Do you see any political ideologies that are armed, let's say, to fight this type of thing? Or does it seem like all of the ideologies are easily co-opted and the people are used as idiot dupes to a sense? Or are there some where you think, well, these guys have a chance to fight it politically in that realm?
Not politically. So the if you look at the document, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, it actually mentions the fact that this conspiracy, and we'll call it a conspiracy because that's what it is so sort of over the top that its over the top nature will not be able to be accepted by most people. Most people won't be able to believe that there is such a thing, even though it's right in their face. And so there's a dual aspect of it being over the top and it being kind of hidden in plain sight in everybody's face, which they think kind of like gaslighting will, basically put the public in a catatonic state. They won't be able to accept it. So politically speaking, no, but I think that the best hope of opposition takes us into the domain of the spiritual realm in terms of Orthodox Christianity. I think is the best hope for fighting this, even with the problems in the Orthodox Church. I mean, I've spent years in both the Protestant and Roman Catholic world myself, so I got to see those worlds from the inside out. And I think that if you look at the Roman Catholic system, there's a lot of well-meaning and sincere people in the Catholic Church, but the problem is that that's a system built on one dude. And so if you get a series of bad dudes, right? It makes me think of Trump. Then you're going to have a bad system, right? The system is going to rot from the head down, as many of the traditional Catholics say. Well, and from the Orthodox perspective, I mean, that's been the problem with the Roman Catholic institution for the last 1,000 years. So I wouldn't say the Roman Catholic institution is going to be any bulwark or help against this insane, mad scientist, technocratic plan. But I do think there's hope with the Orthodox Church. And, I think ultimately reality isn't just matter. It's not just flux, matter, and motion. I think that there are real metaphysical principles. I think God exists, and I think that the Orthodox Church has the ethos, the power to actually be a real opposition. And it does have things to say to politics, but it's not primarily a political movement. I mean, it does tell the state what it should and shouldn't do in terms of ethics, morals, and so forth, but and symphonia. But I don't think that there's a strictly political solution to this, because the problems and the worldview that we're facing is meta-political itself. So you're not going to be able to fight it with something purely political, elections. You're not going to be able to fight it with ideologies that are 100 years old and outdated, like nationalism and these kinds of things. I mean, I'm not against nationalism, but I'm saying that the world is already 100% global. You're not going to be able to have one nation state fight against an integrated global world. So you would at least have to have some kind of larger union. And my hope is that the globalist system itself will kind of destruct. I kind of think that it's intended to, and so the danger there is out of the ashes, they'll try to erect some kind of new federation. If there's some big huge event where there's depopulation or so, I don't know, but that's certainly what the elite all say they have planned for 2030 to 2050 is a mass reducing in the people, in the numbers.
Why every time I speak with someone or I research on my own that's a subject matter expert on the elite and whatever you want to call this, the deep state, the new world order, this type of thing, depopulation always comes up. And again, this isn't on you. Every time I talk to someone, including when I do my own research, why is depopulation, and it's been this way for decades, back and back, it always comes up. Why? That almost seems like that's the ultimate goal or something like that. Why does that come up so often?
Well, my simple explanation is that the spirit that motivates this whole thing is satanic, and Satan has a hatred of mankind because mankind is made in the image of God. Christ took on human nature and deigned to deify it. That provoked the envy of Satan and the demons, and that's precisely why they fell. At least that's the Orthodox view of the fall of the angels. And so they are hell-bent on wreaking havoc upon mankind. And I think that's really the only logical explanation for how you could have a consistent anti-human coordinated agenda on the part of these elites that, even unbeknownst to them, at least they may not all be self-conscious of the fact that they're serving a higher satanic agenda. I mean, that's the best, to me, explanation for how this agenda is the case across the centuries, millennia, right? Going back to the ancient, pagan empires and human sacrifice. Right. Why do we see human sacrifice being a universal phenomenon in all these cultures? Well, the Christian account of the fall actually makes sense of that. It has a good account for that. And it has a great account for what's happening now, right? We're influenced by spiritual forces, both good and evil. Yes. Human beings without God, without Christ, are subject to and continue to give themselves over to evil. And so they become tools of evil, even if they're not self-conscious of that. So I think that's one, that's the ultimate reason. And I think other reasons that are used to justify that on the human plane are things like, well, there's a lot of limited resources. And so they'll go back to Malthus's, speculations about economics, and they'll say, oh, you see, there's limited resources, so we got to kill everybody. And if we don't kill everybody, then the world will fall into chaos because everybody will be fighting over resources, or, too many people, they'll outbreed the elite. It's sort of a classic elitist philosophy, really.
Yeah, everyone who says there's too many people, we need to get rid of some people, they never start with themselves. It's interesting.
Well, that's because it's an elitist philosophy, which says, no, you need to die, not me.
Yeah. There's a few topics that we've kind of touched lightly upon, and I want to ask you about, and it would be postmodernism, relativism, nihilism. To me, that all kind of relates, and back to Alan Watts and then the postmodern movement. Let me ask you this. The postmodern movement and philosophers, do you think, are they idiot dupes in this larger scheme?
To a degree, I mean, the way philosophy works is it's kind of a centuries-long, millennia-long conversation. And so, this generation of philosophers is critiquing, all the dudes before them. And so because it's like a long conversation of critique of the critique of the critique of the critique of the critique, then each guy kind of will have his insight. So the postmodern philosophers are useful for me as an apologist or a thinker, precisely because I see them as taking modernism to a logical conclusion. And the postmodern philosophers are useful because they say, hey, all you modernists, all you utopian progressive people thought that we're going to get better and better and better. None of that actually happened. Things got shitty. They got worse. 2 world wars, things collapsed. And so they are able to say, guess what? The Enlightenment itself was another mythological narrative. Now, as an apologist, that's very useful to me. I'm able to say, hey, actually, I agree with that. So if I was debating a kind of old line Enlightenment, universal, progressive type mindset, I would use postmodern critiques. And I would say, how are you not just doing the very thing that you critiqued religion for? You're just a new myth, a new mythos, a new grand narrative. And so I would use the postmodern critique, but that doesn't mean that I adopt postmodernism, right? Postmodernism itself as a philosophy is self-refuting. It's a dead-end philosophy. It ultimately ends up in absurdity, but it's like using systems as a reductios. Okay, so we had a pagan on the other day, for example, last night, and I was arguing with this pagan guy, and he was like, I was asking him for an epistemic justification for his pagan metaphysic claims. And he got really mad because he was like, I don't have to give it. How dare you ask me those things? Blah, blah, blah. You're a wanga, he says. And I'm like, well, that's a fair question in debate, dude. I don't know why you don't think that's a fair question. And he's like, well, so you're asking me skeptic questions. You must be an atheist. I'm like, no, I'm not adopting a position because I'm asking their argumentation. It's called a reductio argument. So I'm saying that if I was adopting your position, it would reduce me to skeptic absurdity. And I think that's a good argument. It's a reduce the position to absurdity argument. Reductio. I guess he had never heard of this, didn't know what it was. He short-circuited, had a meltdown over this. But I'm saying the same thing with postmodernism. Like I can say, well, okay, so wait a minute. If modernism's presuppositions are true, then it should lead you to the postmodern conclusion, right? That's a reductio argument. It doesn't mean I'm a postmodernist. I'm saying that it should lead you there. And so if you adopt that, which again, philosophy is a conversation in history. It's people saying, hey, wait a minute, the guy before me was an idiot. We should go to this logical conclusion. Then the next guy says, hey, that guy was an idiot. Let's go to this logical conclusion. Right. And so that's a whole history of philosophy is idiots telling the previous idiots that they're idiots. So let's adopt more idiocy. So all I have to do is just pick out the different schools of philosophy. And if I know a person's system and I know the opposing philosophy system, I just can ask them, okay, well, how do you respond to these people's critique? So postmodernism is great actually for us to show the absurdity of some of the atheist progressive systems. However, postmodernism itself is a complete dead end. And unfortunately, yes, the modern world, and you could even argue through pop culture, pop culture began to promote postmodern ideas. Abstract art is postmodern. It promotes more and more abstraction, more and more formlessness, more and more disunity, disharmony. And so in the philosophy, you get deconstructionism. So the linguistic philosophers who deconstructed language and text essentially made words and sentences and books meaningless. But they wrote books to tell you this. Okay, so their books are meaningless. You see, this is a self-repeating thing. So, so I would say that postmodernism is just the next phase after the revolution. As you know, Father Seraphim Rose in his book Nihilism, he charts out 4 stages of revolutionary thought. And after, I think, postmodern, you get into then just full-on nihilism, right? Destruction for destruction's sake, chaos for chaos' sake. So, I would say to the postmodernists, if you really believe postmodernism, you shouldn't be writing books, right?
Right. Yeah, good point. That's it always comes to that, which it's kind of a self-defeating deal. Has the spirit of nihilism that we just touched upon, do you think that's been a large, let's say, problem to where it feels like society today there's an emptiness to a lot of the people. There's people searching. I think that's why they gravitate towards pop culture. They gravitate towards the state. They gravitate towards the earth and worshiping the sun. Does that have to do with nihilism in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think man's, what does St. Augustine say? Our hearts are empty until they're filled with God. And so the more that you throw into that isn't God, it just makes the hole bigger. Yeah, I think St. Augustine's correct on that, and it's applicable to our day and age too. Our zeitgeist is nihilism. I would say we're getting to that point where people are pretty much tossing away hope in these grand narratives and grand ideologies. I mean, in a way, Marxism, for example, was another post-Enlightenment grand narrative ideology. Marxism failed historically, clearly, and so there's not really any classic Marxists left. They just kind of morphed into these other things. You get these the oppressed narrative of economics from Marxism has now kind of moved into like biology, right? The oppressor oppressed of biology, or now it's even turning into crazy stuff like you're oppressing me with logic and math, right? That's an oppressive. Yes. Math is oppressive to me, and it's like a morphing of what classical Marxism used to have to something bizarre and postmodern. And I guess you could say the Frankfurt School critical theorists kind of did this. They took a Nietzschean turn. So, and then the Nietzschean turn, I think, would definitely take the left or the classical left into nihilism. But you could even argue that like fascism is also nihilistic, right? Because it's also kind of, historically speaking, atheistic, pretty much. They might have a better place for theism in their worldview than the Bolsheviks, obviously, but it's still based on kind of an atheistic presupposition, classically speaking, fascism, in terms of modern fascism, I'm saying. But yes, sorry, I'm rambling, but I would totally think that the spirit of our culture is nihilism. Yes. The ethos is nihilistic, and it's gotten to that stage by digression, and that's actually, for the Orthodox perspective, it's not. I mean, I'm not saying it's good that our culture is nihilistic, but it's good in the sense that there's not really many other places to go. Right? I mean, I'm seeing people looking at neo-paganism, occult, witchcraft, New Age stuff now. I don't think that's going to hold people for very long. So really, I mean, it's like we're crossing off all the options, and it's going to be like Orthodox Christianity still standing. So what do you want? You want nothing, or you want orthodoxy, right?
My favorite sponsors and yours, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. They've got some new products that I will be telling you about. As always, I can tell you, Carlos and Vanessa, the owners of PalomaVerdeCBD.com, wonderful people. So when you buy from them, you're supporting a great couple that are like-minded, and it helps support this show that I know you love. Check out these new products. They've got the CBD massage oil. Let your mind wander on that one for a bit here. They've got the full spectrum unflavored CBD tinctures. Check this out, ladies. After a hard day at work, how does a CBD bath bomb sound to you? Well, they've got those now. They've got the CBD soft gels, of course, the CBD gummies, mint tinctures, the salve stick, and of course, the pet treats, the stuff that my French bulldogs, Lux and George, both use every morning. Now, you've heard me rave about the sports cream before. I'm going to read you something one of my friends and listeners wrote to me specifically about that. Last year, I gave my dad a bottle of the Paloma Verde sports cream as part of a present for his 86th birthday. He's very active, walking 3 to 4 miles a day, as well as working with a strength and conditioning coach. Still, his back often bothered him because, well, no prescriptions that he takes ever fixed it. Well, he found the Paloma Verde cream to be very effective in relieving the occasional discomfort. Last week, he slipped on some ice in his driveway and suffered from, thankfully, minor injuries, including his back. For 3 days, he was unable to sleep due to his back pain. He had run out of the Paloma Verde cream, so I gave him the link to the reorder. It arrived within a day or two, and he immediately began using it. He sent me this text the next morning after enjoying his best night's sleep in almost a week since the fall. Quote, "The cream application last night worked like a charm. I was pain-free in just about any position. unquote. In addition, my sister who was staying with him was so impressed by his results that she ordered some for her husband who regularly experiences leg pain at night. My dad resumed much of his regular activity and attributes much of his recovery to the Paloma Verde sports cream for the pain relief and just how much it helped him get the much needed rest at night. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a honest to God, true statement. Someone wrote to me about this cream that I'm telling you, I always brag about how amazing it is. You will find it at palomaverdecbd.com, where you will get 25% off of your order when you use promo code BUCK at checkout. That's BUCK at checkout for 25% off of your order. Go support them and support this show. You will not be sorry. Let's get back to the show. Has there been massive infiltration, CIA, deep state, elite, et cetera, NWO, et cetera, into Christianity and American religion?
Oh, absolutely. Well documented.
Can you give some
absolutely.
examples of? Yeah, can you give some examples of that?
Well, I mean, a long time ago, it was pretty. Actually, empires have always used missionaries as spies. That's an ancient thing. So there's nothing new to that.
Mm-hmm.
The state has always had a desire to co-opt and use the church. There's a long history of this. You go back to the early church where you have Arian emperors, for example, trying to enforce Arianism upon the church. You come up into the Christological disputes in the early councils. You have heretical emperors trying to enforce heterodox Christology. If you get to the Icon Council, that was actually largely heterodox iconoclast emperors trying to promote and make the church iconoclastic. Same problems in the Middle Ages in the West. It's called the investiture controversy, where the state tries to run and control the church, basically turn the church into an arm of the state. So it's a problem that's always plagued the church. It's never going to go away in this world, in this life. In the modern world, in America, we could point to specific plans. You know, the CIA had a whole program called the Doctrinal Warfare Program. David Wimhoff has a big, giant 1,000-page book just on this in the Roman Catholic Church. Now, I'm not singling out Catholics because the Doctrinal Warfare Program would apply to any of the churches. Really, I mean, they wanted to use the churches basically as a form of soft power to promote Americanism during the Cold War. Again, doesn't make the Soviets good guys. It's just that when you link up with these entities and you form these bonds, for example, during the Cold War, John Paul II was constantly meeting with William Casey. They were constantly having sort of intelligence strategy planning for the papacy. And that's because they had long ago, back to 50s and 60s, adopted the C.D. Jackson, John Courtney Murray Jesuit plan of doctrinal warfare. And so when you align yourself with that, you're kind of hooked on that for the rest of time. Right? It's no different than in the Soviet Union when the Soviets would put KGB bishops in, right? And they're trying to control the Russian church. It's no different. It's the exact same thing in the West and America. In America, we like to pretend, oh, that's a Soviet thing. Oh, we're America.
Mm-hmm.
No, that both states did the exact same thing. And there's a long history of this. And it was just the CIA just declassified the correspondence between Bill Donovan, OSS, and I'm pretty sure it was Bill Donovan. It was either Bill Donovan or William Casey in the Cold War to the patriarch saying, we want you to do what we want in the Cold War. Will you do what we want? And the patriarch of Constantinople, oh, yes, I'll do whatever you want. I am basically the bitch of the CIA, right? So that's what he says. It's on the CIA website, declassified, because it's not a conspiracy theory, right? But anybody who studied this in the 20th century is well known. I mean, I've done many, many live streams on this. A lot of the elite documents even say, writings, they'll say, oh, we got to co-opt the churches, of course, to promote our agenda. And that's why you see, Pope Francis 100% going along with Great Reset, everything that Klaus and Davos say. But yeah, I mean, the best book on this is the Wimhoff book, and that's just on the Roman Catholic Church. There's other books too. There's a great book. I don't agree with this guy's total philosophy, but he has a really good analysis of this. Eric Wahlberg's book, Postmodern Imperialism. He's got some really good discussions of intelligence agency uses of like religion and stuff.
What led you, or what made you curious about Orthodox Christianity? You said you had been Protestant for quite some time, and I know you had been Catholic as well.
Yeah, I was raised Baptist. I got more serious about my Christianity when I was 18. Did a little bit of Bible college, did a little bit of Boston Seminary for a while, a year of that, and was really becoming kind of dissatisfied with Protestantism and its whole sort of foundation. And so the more that I got into the church fathers that you see up here, the more I got into the history of the canon of Scripture, the more I just didn't really find my questions answered in Protestantism. And that was back in 2003. There wasn't a whole lot of Orthodox stuff on the internet at that time. So I didn't really know a lot about Orthodox Christianity. I started reading the Latin fathers pretty early on in 2003. And I just really found that Protestantism didn't have a good answer to things like the church's historic teaching on baptismal regeneration, the Eucharist, justification, and how the canon came to be. So I read a bunch of Protestant scholars on how the canon was formed, the canon of Scripture was formed. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, well, the only option here is either Protestant or Catholic. So became a Roman Catholic in 2003. Spent almost 10 years, maybe 8 years as a Roman Catholic. And then the more that I got into Catholic theology, all this stuff over here, I felt like, well, something's off with the papacy and Vatican II, and all the liberalism that was in Protestantism is right here in the Roman Catholic Church. What is going on? Why is this? Why does what I read about in the books, the church fathers, it doesn't seem, it's all on paper. It doesn't match up to reality, what I'm seeing in the actual Catholic Church down the street. So I ended up just gradually reading Orthodox writings, Orthodox church fathers. That took me about 10 years before I ended up becoming Orthodox, but mainly it was because of fundamental questions about the nature of the church, the tradition of the church, the first 1,000 years of Christianity. And it kind of came down to me like, well, number one, what is biblical? What do I see in divine revelation? And then what is the church of the first 1,000 years? And so I spent a lot of time reading about Christianity in the first millennium and reading those church fathers. And eventually I just ended up like, well, there's just really no other option other than Orthodox Christianity.
Do you think the let's see how I can phrase this, because I'm not trying to be offensive to anyone listening by any means. Not to you. I know this won't offend you. I mean, to people in my audience. Do you think the evangelical Protestant megachurch kind of culture has done, I don't want to say more harm than good, but some harm into driving people elsewhere? And a lot of people will say, well, that's what Christianity is, in my opinion. I don't like it. And they look for other things.
I would agree with that assessment. In fact, I was kind of agreeing with that assessment back when I was evangelical, becoming a what's called a classical Protestant. So being raised kind of evangelical, the more that I got into, I kind of worked my way in reverse church history. So I went from like Baptists of the 19th and 20th century. That led me into Calvinism because I was reading Spurgeon and like Calvinistic Baptists. And then I got into the London Baptist Confession. I used to like James White. And then I kind of was like, well, wait a minute, what about Luther and Calvin? So I like read my way back even further to the classical reformers. And I read a lot of Luther and Calvin, found Calvin to be more systematic and convincing at that time. And so I couldn't be a Baptist anymore. And so, but at that point I was like, evangelicalism and megachurch stuff, that was in 2001. Yeah. I was like, no, this stuff is stupid. And so, so it's been about 20 years that I've thought that megachurch evangelicalism is just a joke. And I'm not being mean to the people that, I had a phase where I was evangelical and went to a couple mega churches, not regularly. We don't really have mega churches around here, but that kind of Christianity I felt was just completely paper thin, hollow. It's studies have shown that it doesn't actually retain converts. People leave after a few weeks.
I just to interrupt, there's something I've been thinking about lately, and it hits exactly on what you just said. A little bit, the business model of them reminds me of big gyms, like Lifetime Fitness and Gold's Gym, because a lot of the times they have this kind of cheap membership and people go, oh, cool, I'm into it, especially around January. And then they don't really retain, but those people keep their memberships on the books.
Yes. Exactly. Great analogy. And in fact, I did a live stream a couple months ago, and it was about business church. And I was talking about how the mega church model is to see the church like a business. And I think that results from the Protestant attitude towards the church is really that it isn't a supernatural institution. They see the church as kind of a human social organization, and thus it could be fitted to various models or business models, right? So that's why I think it's business church. It's not actually church in a historic sense of heritage, paradosis, or tradition being handed down. That's a supernatural entity. I mean, for the Orthodox Christian, the visible Orthodox Church is theandric. And for us, that means it's literally the continuation of the incarnation. It's the body of the God-man, theandros, God-man, on earth. And so for us, the church could never be reduced to a human social institution. It has that a component to it, which is it's human, it's social, but it's not reduced to a human social institution. It's a supernatural theandric institution. And so that's why for us, the Orthodox Church has to be affirmed as the only true church. So it doesn't mean that we hate Protestants or that they don't have graces or that they don't have insights or that they can't, begin their approach towards God in Protestantism. But Protestantism by its nature is deficient on a fundamental, and that's the church. And if you don't have the church, you're kind of like floating around in the sea out of the ark. And so we have that famous icon, which is that the Orthodox Church is the ark. So you got to be in the ark, or else you're just kind of floating, and it's a bad place to be.
What does Father Seraphim Rose represent to you?
I think he represents the best American approximation to a saint. So if we were going to pick out American Orthodox, I mean, obviously there was like Alaskan saints, but in the modern world, something approximating an American saint, I think would clearly be him. Pretty easy, no doubt about that. So I think he breathes the spirit of the fathers. He has the sanctity of the fathers in Orthodox Church. His apologetic is really good. I mean, pretty much just, he covers all the bases. I mean, he was a sinful person who converted, lived his conversion authentically, and just all around, he's pretty good. I mean, there's a couple areas I think, he could have incorporated the energies better into his writings and apologetics, but every saint still has defects in his writings and theology. So we don't, none of the saints are infallible. So, I mean, I'm rambling, but that to me represents the modern American saint.
There's people that I would say maybe run in my circles. There's almost been slights made at us saying there's some kind of libertarian to Orthodox pipeline, and they call us post-libertarians because we don't use that label anymore. If you had to discuss whatever you'd like with someone who's an ex-libertarian who kind of messed in the liberty world for a brief time or not, and who's curious about Orthodox Christianity, and this probably sounds like a strange question because I kind of know your feelings on libertarianism, but maybe we could even say any hardcore political ideology, and that's been their who they are for 5 years or something, that they surround themselves with people that only like their politics. Their whole world is doing political meetings and paying party memberships and all of this stuff, and they're curious about Orthodox Christianity. What would you tell them?
I would say definitely pursue your interest, but don't convert to Orthodoxy because you think it will fit libertarianism. I tell based trad political people, don't become Orthodox because you think it's a based trad political movement. Because what happens is that a lot of times people convert and then they're disenchanted because it's not what they expected, because it's not ultimately about that. So we have a hierarchy, I guess you could say, of things that are important and matter. And, the top of that is not politics, right? So the top thing is going to be that it's going to be like you, not you personally, but you in general out there. Will be more like entering rehab. Literally. Okay. So It's not a thing where you go to get together to figure out the best, voting strategy and how are we going to implement the Orthodox Imperium. No, that's all wrongheaded. What you're going to do is you're going to go in there, and if you convert to Orthodoxy, you're going to be in the spiritual equivalent of rehab or like, what's that, like CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people like, whoa, this is what this is, right? Like, so now I'm expected to like fast and to come to the liturgy, and I mean, and it's going to be tough. It's not easy, and I mean, I've messed up at this all the time. Even going to the liturgy and keeping at this, I still fail to do daily prayers. I still mess up doing this, and so and I've been at this for several years now, and so you're going to learn how messed up you are. I don't mean that in a like become a doormat type of thing. It's a good thing because this is going to improve you. It would be the analogies are things like if you're going to learn a martial art or you're going to learn guitar or an instrument, right? Like you're going to suck, right? And it's going to be work. It's not going to be this like you pick it up and you can automatically do Yngwie Malmsteen tapping solos, right? Like it's going to be difficult. But I mean, not so difficult that it's not like there's a peace and enjoyment that comes along with it as well. So I'm not trying to make it out like it's boot camp or something like that. But I mean, Lent is supposed to be kind of be like spiritual boot camp or something like that. But so I would say don't have misplaced expectations as to what it is. Don't think of it primarily as a political thing. It's going to be a thing first and foremost about you experiencing inner transformation. Then as that process happens, then you'll start to notice in your life, the exterior things start to change. And from the Orthodox perspective, there's no way we're going to be able to touch and affect the political sphere without first having the majority of the people, for example, becoming Orthodox, right? I mean, if the majority of America, I mean, I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon, but if by a miracle it did happen, like if the majority of Americans and conservatives became Orthodox Christians, then maybe we could start thinking about the ways that this would impact, and it probably already would impact, the social political sphere. But that's not at the top of that hierarchy. So and if you think about the Roman Empire, right? So the Roman Empire, like the first, second, third century Christians, they didn't convert the empire by like going to try to get Caesar first, right? They had martyrs for centuries, and the blood of the martyrs is what converted the Roman Empire after 3 centuries. And we're kind of in that state. The world we live in now is a lot like that. It's a pagan world, right? We're not living in some Christian imperium. It's a post-Christian, postmodern pagan world, largely atheistic. And so, yeah, I think that worrying about the political stuff is down the road. So your what you see as important and what you see as your focus will shift. Doesn't mean you can't do politics. Doesn't mean you can't be involved. You should take your morals and your ethics and your Christianity and apply it to the political realm if that's what you're involved in. You should do that. But it's not number one.
Right. All right. In closing, I got a couple more book recommendations. Obviously, you can talk about your books as well, but even aside from those, just book recommendations that are off the top of your head.
Well, for a libertarian, I would challenge a libertarian to a different notion of church-state relationships. So I would recommend something that will challenge you. It's called Reflections of a Russian Statesman by Konstantin Pobyanashev. So there is this book here. And I believe that this reflects kind of the traditional attitude of church and state throughout the entire history of Orthodox Christianity. If people are politically, civically bent, that would be a great text to read to see what I would argue is the traditional Orthodox perspective for people who have that interest. Now, in terms of more strict theology, I would always point people to something like, kind of depends on your background, your education level, familiarity with these topics. If you have a little bit of theological knowledge, background, and training, I would say read something like Vladimir Lossky's book, Mystical Theology of the Eastern Church. If you have no background in those things, I would say a good introductory text would be The Orthodox Church by Father John Meyendorff, just to kind of give you an overview of the history and the basic doctrines. Or another book would be Orthodox Dogmatic Theology by Michael Pomazanski. So those are some good introductory texts for people. Again, I usually tailor the recommendations to like people's backgrounds or what they're interested in, right? So some people don't care about philosophy; they don't want anything. They might be more interested in Lives of the Saints or something like that. But do you think your audience would be philosophically libertarian bent? Is that what you think?
Yes.
Okay,
I think so.
I would say a good text would be either the Losky text, definitely the Reflections of a Russian Statesman, little book, which is not very long. And I would say a really good book that might be. This is a tough one.
No, it's all right.
Okay, the best book for you guys would be Orthodox Dogmatic Theology by Father Demetrius Stanieloi, Volume 1.
All right.
That's a pretty philosophical book, though. So that's pretty heavy on metaphysics and epistemology. But it's just so good. It's like my go-to recommendation.
From the feedback you received
from
my
books. So
of course. Yeah.
If you're interested in movies and philosophy, there's two.
Yes.
My two books. And you can get signed copies at my website of my books.
Who do you get feedback on that you do the best impression of? I would say Bruce Springsteen, but we'll see.
Really? I don't think I didn't even think that one was that good. I think a lot of people, I guess, just kind of default to the Nick Cage. But there's I listed one day. I think there was like 35 people. So there's actually, I think a couple more that I do better than Nick Cage. Terrence McKenna is pretty spot on. I would probably say Terrence McKenna or Nicolas Cage.
Awesome.
I mean, what do you think? You really think Bruce Springsteen, or are you trolling?
No, I'm not trolling at all. I laugh out loud, and I've heard you do it multiple times, and it's still for some reason. I think part of it's my wife hates Bruce Springsteen, so she the imitation. The imitation of it hits on exactly the tone and everything of why she hates him, because it's so good. And then you did a whole shtick with his mom jeans and all of that kind of stuff. It's awesome.
Well, he represents the people, right? He's up there with billionaires and Obama representing the people with his cutoff sleeves and his mom jeans, right? It's just so fake, dude.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it seems controlled.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Plug away. Websites, Twitter presence, anything.
What is my if you just search Jay Dyer, I come up on Twitter. Search Jay Dyer on YouTube, I'll come up there. Website's jaysanalysis.com. I do a subscription service. People get access to all the archive of the last 6 years or so of lectures, podcasts, interviews. Global Elite Lecture Series was one of the more popular things I do. Movie analysis, all that stuff is at the website. And then the shop is at the website too, where you get access to my books. All the last year of hosting Lord Voldemort or Al Jonas, all at my website as well. So yeah, everything's at my website.
Awesome.
I'm also on Rockfin, by the way. Rockfin is a great free speech platform.
That's right.
That's kind of my go-to sort of edgier stuff where you can really talk about whatever you want to. You don't get censored. So if you want more of the edgier stuff, over on Rockfin.
Yes, I believe my pal, Brother Augustine, is on.
Yeah, I just recommended him to get on there, and he did.
Yeah, excellent. Cool. Jay Dyer, I'm glad that I passed the test of you coming on this show, that I didn't suck after you listened to those few. No, thanks so much, man.
I listened to 3 in a row, dude. It was good.
This has been awesome. I appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you. Much appreciated, and many years to you. Glad to hear about your interest in becoming a catechumen and all that. So thanks for having me, dude.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. I hope you guys learned some stuff from that interview. Thanks once again to Charlie Robinson. He's a super cool guy on and off the air, I must say. I enjoyed that. You can find my stuff. You pretty much know this, but there's a website, counterflowpodcast.com. It's got a lot of information. It's got t-shirts. We still have a few t-shirts left that you can purchase from that website. If you'd like to support the show, I'm more than happy to accept your loving donations. It can be as little as $1 or as much as you like, really. And that's over at patreon.com/counterflow. Of course, we've got this video that you just heard. This podcast is in video form up on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Of course, just search Counterflow with Buck Johnson. You will find it. And until next week, you guys have an awesome week. See ya.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram brass. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.